Join the Brave Enough podcast with Julianne Williams. Renew, recreate, recover you.
Hello everyone, this is Julianne, and I am so lucky today to be joined by my friend Angelika Carlino. She is someone that I had the opportunity to meet through work, but we found out we had a lot in common, and unfortunately the things we have in common aren't really the fun things. On the other hand, it gives you a lot of empathy and ability to communicate and to...
Definitely helps working in this field.
That's right, to have a bond,
right?
So Angelika has experienced a lot of loss in her life, and I thought it would be really helpful for people to hear about some of the challenges that she's experienced. But what you'll also learn is that she has an extremely successful family and personal life, and she has also built a very amazing career. And so through all the adversity that she's experienced, she has found a way to, like me, live a life of resilience. And so, again, I think you're going to be very inspired today as we sit and talk with Angelika. So, with that, Angelika.
Hi. I thought a lot about this today, obviously. And with moving, I just moved into a new house. So that was also in the process, because when you're moving, you're going through things, right?
Yes.
And you're seeing a lot of memories, and then the move brought up a lot of emotions. It was recently Veterans Day, Memorial Day.
Memorial Day, yes.
So I did make a journey to the cemetery, and that always brings it back. So a little bit of history. I was born on Fort Ord. In fact, I brought with me my first official document, kind of was foretelling, my birth certificate.
Okay.
So if you look, I am born on U.S. Army Hospital, Fort Ord.
Yes.
And if you'll note the occupation of my father.
Where is it?
Where is it?
Soldier.
Soldier.
Yes.
Soldier.
Yes.
Should have been, this was foreshadowing me. So... I'm born in 1968. I have two older brothers and an older sister. My mom is from Germany. Born in 1933 in Breslau, Germany, which doesn't even exist anymore because it was destroyed by the Russians. So she have her own cloud over her. Mm-hmm. And I say this now thinking back in retrospect, but when you're growing up, you don't know all that. So my view now has shifted from the craziness that was. Mm-hmm. So when I was born, my dad was already at the end of his career. He had 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, 3 Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts, 20 plus years of, he was career Army. So he retired out of Fort Ord. My parents bought a house in Marina, which is the foggy little sister of Monterey. Mm-hmm. If you know the coast, you know Marina's foggy. And that's where I grew up, in the shadow of Fort Ord. So the military base was everything then. Fort Ord was the middle class of Monterey at that time. And it was very duty country. When we went to the movie theater on Fort Ord, we stood for the national anthem. When the flag came down in the afternoon, the traffic stopped, everyone got out and they saluted.
That's cool.
It was a very... structured life. Military life is very structured.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, because of my dad's service, we could see cracks. Not so much me, I'm the youngest, but my older siblings who were, I'm the youngest by 6 years, so they're all stair steps. My dad would act in odd ways. He would have flashbacks, and it usually would be triggered by, I remember one time we went to see the movie Taps, and it's not even about the military, it takes place in a military school.
Right.
But my dad started acting weird during the movie, and I was like 10, around 10, and when he got home, it just sort of elevated. And then all of a sudden, he's ramped up, he's going through the house. I remember there was this one particular incident, he was running through the house, turning all the lights on. My mom was following behind them, turning them all off, and he would turn them back. And I'm wondering, I'm like a little kid, I'm wondering, oh my God, what are the neighbors thinking? Lights on, lights off, lights on, It was a chaos.
Yeah.
It ultimately would always end. My mom would have to call 911, my dad would be taken for a 5150, and then he'd be home. And then he'd be good for a minute, and then it would happen again. Mm-hmm. And that kind of escalated.
Why did our thing lock?
That kind of escalated. He shortly after he retired from the military, he took a job with a military contracting company, and did overseas work in Saudi Arabia. And they were training like the Saudi National Guard. They usually take retired military people because they have experience, and then since our government can't train them, this is the way that they were training them in the 70s.
No kidding.
So while he was there, after his second re-up, he was struck while walking down the sidewalk of Riyadh and left for dead, and wound up in, some people found him, took him to the hospital. They didn't even know who he was. Needless to say, because he was a government contract worker, he was very badly injured. My mom had to get like a power of attorney, like, middle of the night type of thing. She had to fly over. They were able to get him out of Saudi Arabia and medevac him to Greece. And he was in the hospital for like 6 months in Greece.
Oh my.
And he had like everything but from his pelvis was broken. And then he suffered a massive heart attack. That, on top of his PTSD already, by the time he got home from that, his drinking ticked up because now he was disabled.
And so how old were you when that happened?
Probably, I'm going to say when he had the accident, 10, 9.
So you were still a little
I was still
girl.
a little kid.
Yeah.
So when he came home, he was disabled. He was working with physical therapy, but he was considered completely disabled. He started drinking a lot because obviously, you're depressed. At this time, my 2 older siblings and my sister moved out. They were all young adults, and they wanted out. You know what I mean? Because it was too much for them. So then it just kind of, and my dad was like 2 people. Actually, he never drank at home.
Okay.
I never seen liquor in our house. We never had beer in the house. He would go to the bar and the VFW, which is the Veterans of Foreign War, where veterans sit around and drink.
Yes.
And drink outside of the house.
Right.
So at home, he was very nice. My dad, he would talk to me, and he showed me his medals, tell me things about the service, which at the time I was kind of young, and I didn't really make a lot of sense, But then he would go out drinking, and then he would come home. My parents would argue. Now, my mom is German, so she was not even a citizen.
Okay.
Right? And she barely even spoke English.
Okay.
And then she stuck in that house with that crazy.
Yeah.
She thought marrying my dad, she was going to come to America, and after growing up in Nazi Germany, it was going to be a good life, and then it wasn't.
Yeah,
it was
hard.
crazy.
Yeah.
So, it was just go out, drink, then argue with my mom. He would come home and want more money. They would argue. He would go back out, and then he would come home. They'd argue, and then it would end, or escalate. Ultimately, it was very chaotic, and I'm a very sensitive person and inquisitive person, and of course I'm soaking this all up, thinking, oh my God. Processing the way you would when you're 10, right?
Right.
You're not thinking about the greater picture like I can see now at 50s plus.
Right.
So I'm just taking this in and not really, to the most part, letting it affect like me academically. Like I went to school, I was a good student, I got good grades. I'm not going to say academics came easily to me, but I didn't really have to study a lot.
Right.
I just was able to cruise through. And so I wanted to go to college. I had several offers, but at that time, my dad, on paper, looked financially okay, but he had a gambling problem on top of the drinking, and so there was no money for me to go to school, so I kind of left. And with my first husband, we left, and then we came to Fresno. We came here. That's how I got to Fresno. And then I thought, you know what? Ironically enough, we ended up in Clovis. Some missionaries came to our house, and I was like, they had this great message, and since I had not that growing up.
Mm-hmm.
We joined the LDS church,
Oh.
and we got married, and we built a family, and we had 7 kids, and that was like my not doing what they did. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And everything was cruising along until my ex-husband decided he didn't want to do that anymore. And then he just left, which left me with no job, no nothing. So I went back to school. That's when I became a nurse. I call myself an accidental nurse because I really wanted to be a lawyer. Well, I got into the nursing program. So I'm like, I could do this. I could do this. So
and you're a great nurse.
Yeah. So I would go to school and I'd take my kids and we'd pack a lunch and go to Bicentennial Park and I'd put the blanket down, study, and let them run around. And then we'd go home and they'd be tired. And that's how I got through school. And then graduated and then got a job in Kingsburg. Mm-hmm. And that was my first job. So Kingsburg is always super close to me. And then this is kind of where, again, as I'm elevating up, doing good things, I always have the down. So during my last semester so I'm already going through the grief of my whole loss of I always wanted the Waltons. Yeah. Growing up, watched the Waltons. I built my Waltons and then my Waltons fell apart.
Yeah.
So it's always like the loss was always there, right?
Right.
And then during the rebuilding of that, I'm doing good things. Then, my dad died in 2009 in prison, and I'll get to how he got there. He died in prison of esophageal cancer because he was a smoker on hospice, and I didn't even know hospice agencies could go to prisons, but I learned then. So I left the chaos of the childhood to get away from that. In 2000, when I was expecting my first son after my 5 daughters, so I was super excited. I had 5 girls in a row. That this baby was a boy, and I was so excited. My mom calls me. Your dad had an accident, and I'm like, well, what do you mean an accident? She said a drunk driving accident. It wasn't just a drunk driving accident. He plowed into a family of 5. 2 of the children got killed. I mean, it was that phone call just sucked me right back into that chaos, and I was like so angry. I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm being thrown into this again. And then to go through all that, I mean, it was just, it would have been better if he would have died in the crash instead.
Right, because you felt like, again, it's just this chaos, this cycle of chaos just continuing, and then knowing that after that accident, it wasn't stopping there.
No. And that was so hard. And my sister, who is Cindy, was very close with my dad, very, very close with my dad. She was, at court, she would go to court every day, and I couldn't. I had to distance myself because to be too close to it just sucks you in, and then it takes you to this dark place.
Yeah.
Where if you stay in the dark place, your life's not going to be good, right? So I had to distance, but my sister stayed close, and the trial, was horrible. All the hearings, and ultimately he pled no contest because he didn't want to have my nephew, whom he had dropped my nephew off at football practice at Monterey High School, and then was heading to the post office, and that's when that accident happened. My nephew would have had to testify, so he said no. So, and then, I brought this. This is the front page of...
Oh.
And that's tough,
It is.
To see your dad like that. This was when he pled no contest. And then they showed my sister, and she talks in this article about, how she also have a drinking problem, how it scared her straight, right? Mm-hmm. And that sounded really good, right? So, this is my last semester of nursing school. He passed away in prison, and I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? I couldn't even actually. I had to squish it a little because I was, I was in my pediatric rotation in nurses school, so I had to compartmentalize, just to get through.
Yes.
So I kind of squished it a little bit. I mean, we went to he's buried at the Veterans Cemetery. We had the military funeral for him, and I kind of pushed it away. Then I graduated in May, got a job in Kingsburg. I was so excited, and I called my sister, on the way back from getting the job, and she was so excited, and she's like, hey, I could come live with you and help you with the kids. And I was like, yeah. Aww. That would be really great, That was the last conversation I had with her. 2 weeks later, she died of a drug overdose. That conversation, I was like, oh, if we could have made it happen sooner,
Right.
Could something have been different,
Yeah, because then you have all of these, and we do. Like, if I would have done this,
right.
I call them the coulda, woulda, shouldas, because I had them,
right.
Around the death of my husband. Like, well, if I wouldn't have left, if I would have done this, if I wouldn't have done,
right.
if you would have said, no, come today.
Right.
Right? That's...
Could things have been different?
Yeah.
And, I think about that conversation, and I hadn't thought about it for a long time. And I was like, how excited she sounded. So now I try to see in that conversation, she was so excited.
Yes.
Oh, we're going to have this plan, and it never happened. And actually, when my mom called me about that too, whenever I would get calls from my mom, it's always bad news. I was on my way I was just walking out the door for night shift. I worked the night shift in Kingsburg. Mm-hmm. My mom calls me with this news, and I didn't know what to do. No. I just went to work. I was like, had the job for 2 weeks. I was like, I don't even know if I can call in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just went to work.
And you're also thinking, I have my kids to support.
Right.
I have,
Right. So it was a bit surreal. That was a bit surreal. But you can push down a little bit. You push a little bit. And then, after that, my brother Daniel, his ex-wife called me and she said, he's had this thing on his leg for a long time. And my brother Danny is not the type to go to the hospital. He was kind of shy, kind of a little bit fragile, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Growing up in that house, mm-hmm. he was not someone who was assertive. It ended up being cancer, and stage 4, and like within months he died. And it was like, wow, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God, why didn't he go to the doctor?
Yeah,
why didn't he go to the doctors? He could have been different, And so, you can only get pushed down so hard, you know what I mean? At that point you kind of feel like a soda can. Remember when you're a kid and you're smashed out? You kind of feel you feel that, And that was when, for me that was the hardest, and I was learning to cope with maladaptive techniques. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I can tell, if I didn't make a change in course in the way I'm thinking about things, I'm going to end up dead. Yeah. Because everyone in that family is ending up dead because they learned bad coping mechanisms. They didn't learn to look at things right. So I started to look and see that I could, I could learn a lot from what I've been through. You know what I mean? Because you gain an insight that you wouldn't have otherwise had. You know what I mean? And honestly, I never looked at it I never thought about my dad had PTSD.
Yeah.
I never really said, okay, my dad has PTSD. But you know what? He had bad PTSD.
Yes, he did.
And especially now that I'm in healthcare, I can see that he had bad PTSD. Yeah. But what are you going to do now? You know what I mean? Right. Now.
So at any of that point, in between any of all of that bad news that kept coming, was there any a time where you sat back and grieved any of it?
No.
Or did you just keep pressing forward?
I just kept pressing forward. Never really, because I felt like I couldn't, because it was going to push me the wrong way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it would push me over.
You just didn't feel like you could handle
handle
all
it,
that
right.
emotion.
And it wasn't probably until 2015 when I met my husband, Jim, and we had a really bad evening out once, and I just completely had like a meltdown. I mean, like a meltdown. And it's only now I can tell him this, but that's as bad as it's going to get. You know what I mean? Now you can see the better, because that is someone who's completely just held it in till they couldn't hold it in, and the volcano broke.
Right.
And then I started to allow myself to feel and really move through those emotions and learn and take what I could from the experiences. And that's when things really started shifting. I could use those, I call myself silver lining dreamer, because I can find the good in anything, right? Something bad happens, I'm like, oh, but this is, and I do it at work too.
Well, and let me say, and I know, check and make sure our little camera's on, and it is, but if you've never met Angelika before, which many of you probably haven't, I would have never known until she confided in me that this happened and brought it to my attention that she'd had so much loss. Because, as she said, the outward energy that she has, and the loving and the caringness and the everything that is about her is just so, I mean, you just take care of people, and you just have that feeling of you just want to go hug you, and and you want to get hugged by you, and you would just never know that you had all of this go on. And
that's the irony, because without all of that, I wouldn't even be this person I am today, right? So I always joke with my husband, all the lessons I've ever learned in life are the hard way.
Yeah.
They're the hard way. There's like no ever easy lesson.
Yeah.
But the things I get from them are usually, enriching.
Yes.
Right? I know what it's like, when I have my veteran families, or when I'm dealing with my connections at the VA, I'm like, I know this patient.
Yeah.
I've lived in that house. Right. I know how to deal with them. You know what I mean? And that's insightful. You know what I mean? Because that's an experience you can only live.
Right.
And when it comes to like being with patients at end of life and handling, grief process, or even explaining to families. Like when I worked hospice for a brief minute with an agency, and I used to call it labor delivery to the other side. Because it's what you're doing, right? There's a lady, when I was going to the LDS church, she gave a talk, and she was talking about like her daughter was pregnant and her grandmother was dying. And she goes, when we have a baby, when the baby comes out, we're all cheering, right? We're like, yay, there's a baby. Yeah. But where the spirit came from, they're grieving a loss, right? Right. So when we lose someone, our grandparent or a loved one, and they pass on, we're grieving a loss. But on the other side, they're like, they're here. So when I try to explain to people that way, then you don't think of it as like, they're just passing on. Yeah. Just when the baby comes and then they go. So,
I love that.
That's another thing I've learned, is that and I truly believe that, because I really feel like my family, like they're my cheerleading section. Like when I'll put on the radio, if I'm going to need to go somewhere and I have something on my mind and I put a song comes on, then you're like, oh, that's just what I needed to hear. It's like, that are those little brownie points that come down when you have that cheerleading section,
Yes.
So by shifting my thought now, with that taking the optimism and choosing joy instead of the dark feelings, you have the control to be whatever you want. I've seen, like, my sister was just the opposite. She went down the dark path with the dark emotions. And that takes you nowhere good.
Yeah.
Nowhere good. You can either choose to see the goodness and the joy, even in a bad situation, or you can choose to see the dark side and then trail down that way, and it only ever gets darker.
Right.
Right.
So when you are in those really low moments, I know what I do. How do you bring yourself to making that choice for joy? Are there certain things that you think about? Are there certain mantras that you have? Is there, how do you get that strength?
I really try to surround myself first with things that make me happy. Mm-hmm. So I love, like, my house, to surround myself with who I am, right? And then to try to stay with positive things, because and that even includes, like, what I watch on television. Like, if I get too dark, like, I remember, like, when I was going through my divorce, I couldn't watch enough of, like, Snap, that Snap show, where the spouse will snap and
I haven't seen that
things. Anyways, but then I started thinking, like, why am I watching this? All it's making me do is have negative thoughts.
Right.
So then I started to try to not watch, really dark things,
right.
With dark topics. Sometimes I'll watch something because it's like something I really have a curiosity about, but
right.
I cannot watch, episode after episode after episode,
right.
Of dark things. And when I surround myself with light, and I try to keep, when I see people, I always try to give a compliment. Always. And I'm at work, I'm like, people think I'm crazy, and the nurses, I'm like, hey, I like your shoes. Oh, I love that hat. They're like, wait, you're crazy. I'm like, no. People love to get compliments.
Yeah.
And then that makes me happy.
Right.
Or putting on some music I like, that makes me happy. Having a good conversation with my, husband before work, that makes me happy. Mm-hmm. So you have to be a little bit intentional about it, right? Set up an environment you like and keep your thoughts positive.
And you have your 2 puppy dogs.
Yeah, we have our dogs, Freddie and Ziggy. They're like the best. And they bring us a lot of joy too. Yeah. So I find focusing that way, then it kind of makes it easier. One day gets better than the next, and you're obviously going to have bad days, right?
Right.
Everyone has a bad day.
That's right.
But if you still try to surround yourself with positivity, even like it's those little corny saying things in the house. I'm like in the bathroom, I'm having the thing, because those, bring up a happy thing.
Right.
Happiness is a choice.
Yes.
So I don't think a lot of people get that. I'm like, you have to want to choose to be happy, and then to see the bright side of things, even when bad things happen, and then the other little phrasing I was thinking about was, when you're in math class and you're learning the exponent, that, like, the negative plus the negative is a negative.
Yes.
But the negative times the negative is a positive.
Right.
So if you have, like, what I call negative multiplicity, then your negatives are always going to be positive, right?
Yeah.
You can learn anything from them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of...
I love that.
So, yeah, like, if you just think of it, a negative times a negative is a positive.
Yes.
It's the way you phrase your thought.
That's right.
So, then you get excited because you can learn from anything. And actually, they're your best teachers, actually.
Yes, I agree.
The hard things. Because the easy things you probably already knew a little bit.
Yeah.
And the hard things, you're like, you didn't want to think you didn't know that. But then you're like, I really didn't know that.
I love it.
Right?
It is true. It's true. And I even said, like, to my kids, I've learned more from my bad bosses than my good bosses, even though I have tons of stuff that I've learned from my supervisors that were amazing.
Right.
But the things that I really learned about what I didn't want were from the people that caused me pain.
Right.
And it's the same scenario, right?
Yeah, you can take away the things you need to take away and put away the things that are going to be harmful. Now, that's a skill, obviously. You have to learn it. And when you're older, it's a little bit easier because you have more common sense.
That's true. Life experience teaches you a lot.
But, you start to see things differently, and then you feel like you can propel yourself off that. The positive energy that can come from the negative energy. So, but again, then you have to allow yourself to feel that.
That's right.
And one of the things I think is wrong with society right now is that people are disconnected because they don't want to feel. So they take this or they take that and they disconnect, And I think it's hard too with technology, it's more discreet, it's sad how for technology is supposed to bring us together, but people feel more isolated than ever.
Yes. Well, and one thing I always say is, if you want to release it, you have to feel it. Right. So you have to feel it to release it. If you don't feel it, then it just stays right there. And I think, I asked you the question about, did you have a time to grieve in between your losses? Because did you find that every time it was harder? Or did you find that you became less able to cope with your emotions? What was it? Because, that's why I try to get people to understand is we've got to work through what we're working through as, if possible, as close to the circumstance as we can.
So I never worked through my dad or my sister. They were just too close. And then my brother, not really either. And it wasn't until my brother died in 2011. 11. And it wasn't until 2015 where I had that complete meltdown. This was right after I met my husband, and I don't know, maybe it's because I felt safe that he was the type of person that he could see me at my worst.
Yes.
And he just got to know firsthand what the worst is, and only gets better from here, right?
Well, look, it worked out.
But at the same time, it was a volcano. Because if you don't deal with it, it just
and did you find during that time when you really didn't do the work, did you find that you were less content? Did you find that things were harder? Did you find that you were more frustrated? That you didn't sleep as well? Any of those things?
No, because I had still the focus of I was starting a career. I was, having to make a home life, more solid now that I had an income, and kind of build that. But at the same time, the pressures were there. I was wavering. My daughters, who were young teenagers then, were having issues because the energy they're getting from me was funky, right? Because I never processed that. I'm focused, but kind of, instead of focus like this, you kind of get jerked back because of that bad energy. So it didn't all kind of settle until I had the meltdown, and then I just realized, oh my God, this has all happened.
Yeah.
And I kind of didn't really acknowledge it because I couldn't, because I had to stay on track, and then acknowledging all of it all at once.
Right.
It's just like.
So what were some of the things that you did, in that situation where, you fell apart, things really just kind of crashed in on you? What were some of the things that you did to begin to recover and renew yourself?
I tried to kind of connect more with my memories, and kind of work through that and kind of say, okay, everyone wants to think of their childhood a certain way. You look back and you go, oh yeah, that was a great time at Marina. And I played Little League Baseball. I had a great little group of friends. I on the outside it looked okay, but there was a lot of chaos, and trying to come to terms with it's really difficult when you can't look at something as just that's bad, right? When a loved one is involved in something, you can't just say, oh, that guy killed those two kids in that car accident, that's bad person. Well, if it's your dad, you still love your dad. You
That's
know what I
right.
mean? They're complicated feelings, although I was pretty pissed off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And pretty just, how could this, not how, I knew how this could get like this because it was just a continuance of the way it always was. But you still have to there's acknowledge that this is your dad, you had dad things you did with your dad, and then there was this, you know what I mean? And,
Well, it was just like pain caused by pain.
right.
And that's the thing is that but the hard part was that you knew what his pain was caused for.
Right.
The hard part is that you knew the pain that he caused someone else.
Right.
And that was something, especially because I know how you are in your heart.
Right.
I mean, I'm not that anybody wouldn't feel terribly sad, but I also know that you are extremely compassionate.
Right.
I mean, that's why you're a nurse.
Right. I mean, that's, so that dealing with all those emotions, working through that, that was a lot just on that. And then my sister, and that was hard, I never really said out loud, like when people would ask how your sister died, I would say initially, it was prescription medication. It took me a long time to say she died of a drug overdose.
Right.
Right. I was thought if I said it this way, it was
You were trying to respect her.
right,
Yeah.
and coming, wishing that, when she said that my dad's incident had scared her straight, well, obviously not. You know what I mean? So that was tough, dealing. Yeah, my dad and sister were a lot alike.
Yeah.
They had a lot of the same habits.
Right. Well, and I think too, I mean, for me, you have to make decisions. One thing that I tell people is, asking someone how someone died is a really tough question to put out there. And the reason it is because you never know for the person who's experiencing loss if they're ready to discuss it or if they want to discuss it or if,
Right.
I was very honest from the beginning because I knew being in a small town that someone would probably tell one of my kids. And so I decided it would be the best thing. And because it was mental health, I knew they were going to have to be aware.
Right.
But, so I would advise people, and I have a podcast on what to say and what not to say. And one of the things not to do is ask because that created a lot more pain for you. It was well-meaning. And I know people are just curious, but it's in that time of trying to be well-meaning or even trying to empathize, we end up actually hurting the person that we're talking to more.
Right. Yeah, and then it seems like one of those questions that's pretty benign, right?
Right.
Yeah, I guess when you think about how people die, it's kind of a strange thing, you know what I mean? My mom's kind of the only one who sort of died on a more regular course.
Right.
She was on hospice and had COPD and outlived all of them.
Right.
But she had a lot of loss issues too. If the loss was a lot for me, she lost her. They were divorced, but I mean, my parents generally loved each other.
Yeah.
They were just both very dysfunctional. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I honestly felt like they loved each other.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that their relationship was chaotic, I mean, there are a lot of things behind that. And so you kind of have to give them some credit for even sticking in there when, I mean, both, PTSD is very serious and thank you to your dad for serving our country because he paid a big price and so did your family. I'm with her coming over to the United States and losing everything in that way. It's a lot for two people to try to come together and resolve between each other.
It is, and then you see the ripples, and when people think about PTSD, they think about the soldier.
Right.
But I'm 53 years old, and my life has been a ripple of PTSD.
Yes.
Do I think that my sister's death was directly related to my dad's PTSD? Yeah.
Yes.
Do I think my brother's, his behaviors, the way he felt about himself, do I think some of that led to not seeking treatment? is that directly related? I think so too.
Right.
So it doesn't just affect the soldiers. There's a
Right.
whole family. When you see these young soldiers coming and you see all the children, they're going to live in that chaos. You know what I mean? And it's going to affect them.
Yes.
And so long after their dad will be grown, they're going to be grappling with many maladaptive behaviors and things that they've learned. So when I'm sitting here talking about my dad, Vietnam veteran, this is still something, we can help people with young children. Because if you grow up in that household, there's really only two ways you can go. Mm-hmm. You're either going to be a joyful person who's going to grasp that this has all been for your good. 50 years later, you can come to that realization.
Yeah.
Or you can take the dark path.
Yeah.
And let all the negative emotion break you.
Mm-hmm.
And the choice is yours. So if you can help people see that that's not the path to take.
Well, and I think, I talk a lot about grief is not just death. It's not just divorce. It's not just loss of a job. It's everything. It's not just one thing that causes grief. And even in this case, you grieve the fact that your family did not have the dynamic that you would have wanted. I'm sure that your parents wouldn't have wanted. And then it caused all this other, like you said, ripples that are still here today.
Right.
And so grief comes from so many places. Even if you don't have all this corresponding loss, if you had that chaos growing up, you may have grief over the childhood that you did not get,
right.
or grief over the parent that was unable to be the person that they could have been because of the tragedies that they saw, witnessed, and experienced. And so it's like, I think you're giving us another lesson here on another way that we can support people in, the scenario of living in a household in PTSD, especially with, we've had a lot of wars.
Yeah.
And, it's just really important to acknowledge that everything comes at a cost.
Everything comes at a cost, and the cost is, it can be in lives, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Obviously, in my family, it's in that way, but I know now that I'm the only one left, mm-hmm. I feel like that I have my cheerleading squad.
Yeah.
They always, I feel like they're propelling me. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you got this for all of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that way, I get all the good energy back. I told my husband, I said, you're lucky I got the good genetics because nobody was making it past 50. You know what I mean? So you're lucky that I got the better sense of all the good bits. Because, my dad had a lot of good traits, right? My dad, he loved talk radio. To this day, I get in the car, I listen to talk radio, right?
Yes.
So there's things that I got, that I'm happy. And even now, I don't regret that. I don't regret my childhood. You can't change anything.
Correct.
Because this is who you are in this time. And so if I've learned all that and I've evolved to where I'm at now, then something good is coming out of it.
Yes.
Right? And you have to just be more optimistic. So I try to just stay optimistic all the time. At work, I get overly happy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I love to have fun with the residents. I love to interact with the families. I love to teach. I love to help the nurses see things in different ways, and have them come from that point of view, because I think, overall, especially in a SNF setting, mm-hmm. when things are happy and you have a happy facility and everyone is engaging and joyous, you have better metrics.
Yes.
Your rates will be better, your fall rate will be lower, less altercations. You'll even have less pressure injuries because people are up and doing things.
That's right.
Happy residents are healthier residents.
Yes.
So if you incorporate that, everything is better.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is better.
Yes, I agree.
And so that's kind of just how I just live. Just mostly all the time try to be happy. And then only those who know me really well know that there's the understory, right? That's the flip side. So I'm going to live on this flip side, right? But that's my understory.
And I think the important part, though, is that you really are happy.
Right.
You know, yes, you still have all of this loss. I was, I guess, on a podcast today, and what I, always say is we don't lose the loss.
No.
We integrate the loss.
Oh, that's a great word.
Right?
Right.
Because that's what we do. We find a way to work it. It works into our life. It becomes a part of the rest of our days, whatever, that loss is. It just becomes a part of the rest of our days. And so, but we can decide to let that steal our joy, or we can decide to be happy. And while you still have all of that, and it's, by the way, still okay to have tears, no matter how long it's ever been. No, I mean, some days I cry, and some days I don't. I never know how I'm going to react.
The act of crying actually reduces stress.
Yes, that is true.
So you actually feel better.
Yes.
So you have the good cry, and
That's
then
right.
not just psychologically, but physiologically, you feel better. It releases stress. So it is okay to cry.
Yes, it is. And so,
okay
it doesn't matter how long it's been. And so, I think, you today, for me, I just love you more every time I get to talk to you.
Aww.
And I do. And I mean, I learn from you so much. And I hope, we've been now probably about 45 minutes. And so, this has been, I learned today from you again. And I hope that everybody that listens and watches has something that they can take back with them. I appreciate you sharing. It takes a lot of courage to tell your story and to be so vulnerable and to be so candid and honest, because I know it's all inner strength that makes that happen.
Right. I mean, that's where it comes from, the inner strength. So, and honestly, I can't feel bad for having grown up like that, because this is who I am. So no matter how bumpy the road was, it was the road that was always going to be.
Yes.
And so, that's what makes me happy. I feel like I get to have my family again, but in this really productive way.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where all their better attributes are like helping and steering me in any just little ideas I get. So I feel very blessed by that, because it reaffirms that when we die, that's not the end, right?
That's right.
So that makes living here a little more bearable, because
does.
something else is going to come.
That's right.
But it helps me, because there's times when you say, gee, I wish I could call my sister and say. So I have little private conversations, like when I'm rollerblading, I have conversations with them. You know what I mean? In my head.
Yes.
I'm not schizophrenically talking while
I probably talk that loud.
But I'm having conversations, and it makes them stay close to me.
Right.
And then that makes me happy.
Yes.
So I can see all the good, and the bad now has a better shade on it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you have your kids and
Right.
grandbabies,
And that helps, too.
You've worked very hard to create a really beautiful life.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy where I'm at now, and I feel like there's still more.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like there's still something, out there, and then I feel like if I stay in the happy channel, that's where I'm going to find it.
That's right.
So that's where I stay.
I agree.
Life's too short to be grumpy anyways.
It is. And, and we have to have fun before we get too old.
Right.
And we can't have fun anymore.
No,
Although we'll probably be still fun in the nursing home.
Right.
Anyway, all right. Well, we're going to close down for today. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And again, I hope Angelika had some words of wisdom for you. I know I learned something which always, I'm never done. And so that's partially why I do this as well, is to have continuous learning about grief and how to help others myself. We will talk to you soon. And again, if you like the content, please subscribe, and share. Thank you, Angelika.
Thank you so much. This was great. All right.
If you are inspired by this podcast, leave a review and share it with your friends. You can always connect with Julianne Williams at juliannewilliams.com.